Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is next part of Godlike Hokage in Naruto. The Gura Gura no Mi is known as the strongest fruit in the world of One Piece. In Naruto world, the blood limit would grant the strongest power for those ninjas. But what if the Gura Gura no Mi is found in the world of Naruto and after it is eaten it will be like a blood limit power? Well, the MC just took that fruit. This story begins before the Second Ninja War by 2 years. So let's start without any delay. This is how chakra control works. Not far from Konoha's camp, between the trees, 2 people stood there, and the one who was explaining the chakra control was Naito. Anko stood next to him, revealing a thoughtful expression. Naito had nothing to do while Orochimaru was doing his research, so he decided to help Anko in her training. Of course, this wasn't the whole story. The key point is that Naito had a theory, and he wanted to try it on Anko. According to Orochimaru in the original, he developed the cursed seal of heaven and applied it on 10 people, the only one who managed to survive it was Anko. Naito wasn't interested in the cursed seal. He is only interested in how to transform natural energy into other people's bodies and enhance vitality. Currently, Naito is not old, but he's not the youngest shinobi anymore. Even Kushina, with Kurama's strength, will age and eventually die. What Naito needed to do is to find a way to help Kushina get rid of aging. Tsunad's reverse seal can only heal. It can prevent death, but it can't give you immortality. With Naito's perfect sage mode, even if he lives for hundreds of years, his body won't show signs of aging because Naito's vitality is too strong, and at any time, he can absorb vitality from the natural energy between heaven and earth. However, this kind of vitality cannot be transmitted to other people, of course, because it's a vitality, but it's essential. The natural energy can, but still, it is difficult to control. Controlling natural energy will need years of practicing the sage mode, and this is certainly not something that everyone can easily do. What Naito seeks is to create something like the cursed seal to help the body absorb natural energy. First, he taught Anko the precise control of chakra. This girl's shrewdness is good. In a short time, she understood everything that Naito has explained, and now she has reached the final stage. Thank you, Naito-sama. Anko was happy that Naito has spared some of his time to teach her these things, which made her respect him even more. With a hint of enlightenment in her eyes, she bowed down to Naito. You're welcome. Naito smiled slightly and said, Orochimaru is busy doing some researches, and since you're his disciple, it's only natural to take care of you for the time being. Anko was grateful no matter what the reason. Although he didn't look like he cares, Anko herself knew that if he didn't teach her, it would have taken her years to figure all of this out. Well then, continue your training. Naito nodded at her, then he jumped to the treetop and sat there leaning against the trunk of the tree. She kept watching him with admiration, then she began her practice. After Anko's chakra control reached the limit of her age, Naito chose not to conceal anything from her and directly told her that he can help her become stronger, but with risks. What surprised Naito, that Anko didn't look afraid of these risks. She directly agreed, and she said she's even willing to let Naito experiment on her. Sure enough, you can't expect anything less from Orochimaru's disciple. Anko is so obedient, but Naito's attitude was different from her master. He wanted to take good care of her. Therefore, he asked her to tell him when she feels pain or discomfort, so he can stop immediately. He didn't know if he was lucky, or Anko is special. The moment he injected some of the natural energy into her body, a mark was formed on her face. She is absorbing natural energy. Because this is not a cursed seal, there's no such a mark of 3 black tomo on her body. Instead, there was a little light dot on her forehead, which was similar to Tsunad's reverse seal. The first stage of the attempt was successful, and Ainako's strength improved magnificently. She jumped from close to Chunin level and reached the level of a close Jonin. Whether it's the amount of chakra, speed, or strength, there has been a great improvement. After the discovery of this incident, Orochimaru was somewhat surprised, but he had no intention of stopping it. Instead, he was very interested in what Naito has done. However, he was currently studying the relationship between the soul and chakra, and he still didn't have time to explore natural energy and physical transformation, so the changes that occurred on Anko didn't attract a lot of his attention. The enhancement she gained and the power that has been given to her by Naito made Anko admire the former even more. This made Naito feel a little helpless, thinking that Anko didn't deserve to be brainwashed in the original. After several trials, Naito determined that this transformation is not only effective on Anko, but also others, and the success rate is extremely high. Even if it fails, Naito can quickly suppress natural energy at any time. This transformation can slightly improve the activity of the human cells. Although it's only slightly improved, Naito estimated that the rate is about 30%, which means that if a person has a lifespan of 100 years, after this transformation, it can increase to 130. The success of the first stage made Naito more optimistic, so he started immediately with the next step of the experimentation. Anko has also agreed, even with more risks. She was willing to continue. In this regard, Naito couldn't help but want to laugh. It seems that Naito has robbed this disciple from Orochimaru. No, it should be said that this is the right thing to do regarding what Orochimaru is gonna do to her in the future. The second phase of the transformation wasn't easy. Naito has hit more bumps on the road. He failed more than 10 consecutive times. And the reason for the failure is that whenever he discovered that Anko is feeling discomfort, he will immediately stop, not willing to let her experience any pain. For this, Anko was more grateful to Naito, and she even proposed that there's no need to stop, but Naito has always answered her with a smile and refused. Naito's methods are quite different from Orochimaru's. After he developed the cursed seal, Orochimaru found that it was more convenient to find another person to test, and he didn't care if that person suffers pain or even die. He only cared about results. Naito thinks if the person transforming feels uncomfortable, it proves that the process itself is imperfect and needs to be improved. After several fails, Naito finally succeeded, but this time, it seems that it's really because of the unique nature of Anko. In the original, she was the first successful subject to survive the application of the cursed seal, and he needed to discover that unique element. Anko didn't have the slightest discomfort or pain in the process. The application of the second stage was completed successfully, but still, Naito couldn't find a way to do it on other people. After another failed test, Naito sighed and shook his head. It looks like it won't be easy to achieve. Anko, you're an exceptional one, he said, then touched Anko's small head, who was standing on the side. Anko is now very familiar with Naito. She no longer fears him and watches him with awe, but she smiled at him and looked up, then said, "Of course, I'm the one who got chosen by Naito-sama." Naito has always felt that the way she refers to him by Sama is a bit strange, but he never said anything about it. Naito calls this the transformation of the immortals. If you can complete 5 transformations in a row, you should be able to achieve the same physical strength and vitality that Naruto has gained after he perfectly mastered the second stage of the Sage Mode, but of course, this is too difficult. Even the second phase of the transformation was only successful on Anko. This future is far away from happening. After the second stage, Anko's strength has once again jumped levels ahead. From nearly Jonin, she stepped in the Jonin level directly in one fell swoop. If she weren't too young, and practiced more ninjutsu, she would have leaped straight to the elite Jonin level. Anko's talent is not comparable to Kakashi's, but after the transformation of these 2 stages, it has already caught up with his footsteps. Orochimaru wasn't particularly concerned about Anko. He only treated her as a temporary assistant, but after these transformations, Orochimaru was shocked. Originally, he wanted to study Anko. However, Naruto directly warned him not to even think about harming her. Orochimaru honestly could only give up on that thought. Whose disciple is Anko in the first place? In the following time, Naruto didn't continue the experiments of the third stage on Anko, because Orochimaru has finally finished his research. The result made Naruto quite interested. The deepest connection between chakra and soul was found by Orochimaru. Naruto has long felt that chakra and soul are related. Body, chakra, soul, there's an absolute connection between these 3. Although, the relationship between the body and chakra has already been found hundreds of years ago. Not to mention the body and soul, simply because if they weren't connected, we wouldn't be alive. However, the connection between chakra and soul has always been in vain and challenging to be found. Although it is possible to deduce some answers using the spiritualization technique, it's still tough to touch the core. While Orochimaru was studying the chakra and the soul of the Baijuo, he finally found the essential connection between the chakra and soul. Chakra is the nutrient of the soul. As everyone knows, once the human body is exhausted and drained out of chakra, it means that the host is gonna suffer an inevitable end, death. There's a problem here. Physical strength is undoubtedly related to the body. When the physical strength is exhausted, it means that the body has no stamina. When chakra is exhausted, it merely means that the host has run out of chakra. But what about the soul? Why does the soul gets disconnected from the body due to the exhaustion of chakra and physical strength? The connection between the soul and body doesn't need to be studied. The focus is on the relationship between soul and chakra. Orochimaru has come out with an answer. That the soul lives in the human body as its vessel and nutrient on its chakra. Once the chakra is exhausted, and nutrients are lost, the soul will leave the vessel, and get summoned by the afterlife world, which means death. Just like the Edo Tensei, if you combine a part of the human, plus chakra, you will be able to forcibly summon the soul from the afterlife world. After getting the research results from Orochimaru, Naruto felt that the fogs have gotten cleared on many things out of his mind. The soul uses chakra as a nutrient. The answer to strengthening the soul is simple. Nourishing it more with chakra, but requires a unique method. Regarding this unique method, Orochimaru hasn't studied it in detail yet, but he gave Naruto rough speculation on its concept. However, Naruto hit another bump on the road. His body, chakra, and soul are perfectly combined, that is to say, his chakra can only nourish the function of the soul, but cannot strengthen it. If he wants to enhance his soul, he will need to devour the chakra from the outside. Moreover, that chakra must not have an unconscious or soul on its own. Otherwise, the two souls will have conflicts, and this can cause damage. If Orochimaru has studied this, his soul wouldn't be damaged in the original and get swallowed by Sasuke. And maybe this is why Takai has insisted on getting Orochimaru's soul out of Sasuke, because he was afraid that his little brother's soul will also get damaged. Even if one of the souls is strong to the extreme and the other is weak, the conflict is inevitable, which will undoubtedly damage the soul. It can be said that two different souls are like water and fire. It's impossible to combine the two. The water will inevitably evaporate, and the flame will certainly extinguish. To devour chakra to strengthen your soul, you must meet two conditions. The first condition is to possess a method to absorb the chakra from the outside. The second, the chakra must be a soulless, unconscious free one, just like the natural energy scattered between the heavens and earth. Chasing others' chakra won't enhance your strength. Senju Tobirama understood the mystery of chakra and soul. He was the creator of the Edo Tensei. This technique is based on the understanding of the connection between the soul and chakra. He had Hashirama between his hands, and he could do almost any experiments he wanted, and catching a Baijua at those times was just like playing. The experimental environment is much better than what Orochimaru got currently, and it's no surprise that he studied more things. To find an unconscious, soulless pure chakra, the conditions are more demanding. Any ninjas must have a soul. Thus, their chakra cannot be used. The Baijua are also out of the formula since they also have souls. Chakra, with a soul, cannot be used. Just by this condition, I'm afraid finding such a thing in this world is impossible for anyone, except Naito. Naito knew just the place to find a pure chakra without soul and consciousness. Ryumyaku is the place he's seeking. That is to say, this chakra can be used to nourish and strengthen the soul. For Naito, enhancing the soul was the key to breaking the shackles on his body and opening the 7th and the 8th gates. Now he finally has a clear path in front of him. This world is still too big for Naito. People say that he currently surpassed Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. Even if he did, the world has still Hagoromo and Kaguya, and these are the true gods of this world. It's too early before he can face them. Once Hashirama and Madara conquered the whole Shinobi world by themselves. But the later stages of the original had more influential people than these two, and Naito needed to be ready for them. In the dense jungle, a team of cloud shinobis was moving forward quickly. Although this is only a small team, the members of this cloud squad are enough to shock the world. The 4th Raikage of the Cloud Village and the Hakaibe's Jinchuriki. It's not a secret that these two are the strongest shinobis in the village. The team was moving in silence, and none of them knew what the purpose of their mission is. Coincidentally, in the front, there was another team moving in the jungle, at top speed, led by Namikaze Minato. The commander of Konoha forces is Shikakunara, a member of the older generation of the Ino Shikacho team. Minato wasn't a commander, but he often acts alone and leads a team. Because of his technique, the Flying Thunder God, he's too flexible, very good at acting alone. The average ninja cannot keep up with his speed. No one can stop Minato if he wants to act alone. He's completely free to come and go. Even if he faces a stronger opponent, he can always escape. However, this time, Minato wasn't alone, he was moving with a small team. This squad was formed by 3 ninjas, Hatake Kakashi, Uchiha Obito, and Nohara Rin. Kakashi is a Jonin now just like me, thus, for this mission, we're gonna split up forming 2 teams. You will attack the supply line behind the cloud camp, and I will attack them from the frontal lines to attract their attention. While walking through the jungle, Minato said to Kakashi and the others. Since Kakashi is a Jonin now, Minato thought that he can fill the captain position and lead Rin and Obito. Don't worry, Minato-sensei, I will complete the task. Attacking the enemy from the front is a little bit dangerous, sensei. Please be careful. Rin looked worried about her teacher. Kakashi, who looked calm on the side, said, Rin, don't forget that sensei is Konoha's yellow flash. Minato looked at his 3 disciples and smiled. Kakashi has participated in the battlefield against the Sand. However, after the arrival of Naruto, the Sand's offensive forces suffered a hard blow, and the pressure on the battlefield was reduced too much, so Konoha decided to dispatch some of its troops and send them to the Clouds battlefield. Kakashi has also got his promotion after that battle. Just when Minato was about to leave Kakashi and the others, he suddenly noticed something and stopped. Kakashi's reaction was slower, but he also felt something. Obito didn't have any idea about what's happening, so he continued to move forward, but he suddenly got caught by Minato, who pulled him back. Suddenly, even Obito's expression has changed. The 4th Raikage's team has also stopped at the same time, and the two met in the middle of the jungle. Is this the Hakai B's Jinchuriki? Kakashi immediately recognized B's identity. He knew him because the former has participated in more than one battlefield. Almost every Konoha shinobi knows him. The only Jinchuriki who can perfectly control the Hakai B. Suddenly, Kakashi's expression has changed slightly. Killer B was standing at the back, so naturally, he wasn't the captain of this team. The real one should be standing in front. I didn't think that the 4th Raikage would come to the battlefield in person. Minato expressed calmly while he looked at the 4th Raikage in the front. Even when he was facing the 4th Raikage and the Hakai B's Jinchuriki, Minato didn't have the slightest fear. With the Flying Thunder God technique, even if he encounters an enemy 10 times stronger than the 4th Raikage, Minato can still retreat at any time. No one can chase the speed of the Flying Thunder God. After all, it's a space ninjutsu. You're Konoha's Kiroi Senko, I've heard that you're strong. The Raikage stared coldly at Minato, with murderous intent in his eyelids. Killer B, on the side in a raping style, said, Kiroi Senko is a flashy yellow color, his Thunder God is a major component, right from the top he's a worthy opponent, but the win here is gonna be for the blue color. Oh yeah. Win after win is the way that it's done. When I'm through, you'll wish we'd never met, son. B, stop it. The Raikage said. No way, Bakio, Konoyo. Killer B replied. Because Killer B was the main combat power of the Cloud frontline battlefield, he fought against Minato more than once. He can easily outplay him when he is in his human form, but once he opens the complete form of the Hakai B, Minato becomes helpless. Even the Rasengan cannot cause much damage to the Hakai B. However, even with the use of the Hakai B's chakra, Killer B cannot catch to Minato's speed. The former strength is enough to crush any strong opponent under the Kage level, and most of the people in that level can still be defeated by him. Even the Super Kage level is helpless against him when he uses the Flying Thunder God. As long as this guy is dead, the front line of Konoha will completely collapse. These words don't seem entirely accurate, but the 4th Raikage was speaking in a statement way, while his body was surging thunder around it. For a moment, that powerful chakra made even Minato surprised, while on the other side, Kakashi, Obito, and Rin all looked shocked. What a powerful chakra, is this the Cloud Village Raikage? It's not only the chakra, the gap is too big, and there's also the Hakai B's Jinchuriki. Kakashi took a deep breath and looked around, trying to come out with a plan. Minato knew that there's no way around this, and he needed to make sure these kids will come out of this safe, So he turned to Kakashi and the others and said, "Listen, you guys, don't involve in the battle, and when you feel like you have the chance, run." On the other side, B looked at Minato and his team and said to the Raikage, "It seems that the Kiroi Senko has brought some kids with him to the battlefield. Do you need me to kill them?" "No, those little kids are not important. After we kill him, these brats will be afraid to the point where they won't even be able to run." The look on the Raikage's face looked cold. The thunder arc continued to spread around his body until it covered entirely. The battle was on the verge of beginning. However, at that moment, a slightly playful voice suddenly emitted from the side, which stagnated both sides' movements. "I just came over, and here I'm encountering an interesting thing. Although a lot of things have changed, others never change." Silence. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the treetops on the side. "It's you, Naito. HolyOniiSama here, so, as the people have spoken, I keep the current cover for now, but, I had an ingenious idea. Why don't I let you guys make a cover for the novel, like a fan-made cover, so, I won't be taking down the cover chapter, so, you can post your cover images in this paragraph comment, let the best fan-made cover win. Oh, don't forget to leave your name somewhere in the cover to give yourself credit. You guys can choose the cover you like by liking and commenting on that. I like this contest already well, my first contest. So, do your best and prize is extra 10 chapters. Tell me in the comment here what the prize should be, or chapters should be. You guys are so gonna work me to death, but the end date is gonna be December 10. Or earlier, just tell me. Thanks, from HolyOniiSama. The moment they saw Naito's figure, whether it was Minato, the fourth Raikage, or the others, they all took a step back. They didn't recognize that it was him yet. They all looked surprised. How did he catch them out of their guard without any of them noticing him? When they identified that he was Naito, the surprise changed to a shock, and the atmosphere in the place changed. Minato felt surprised, but he also felt relieved. Since Naito has finally joined the battlefield, the pressure can finally be eased. The fourth Raikage has felt surprised in the beginning, but those feelings quickly turned into unlimited hatred and anger. "It's you." The tone of the fourth Raikage had a touch of coldness and anger in it. For a moment, the chakra that was surging out of his body seemed more violent. His aura became terrifying, and in an instant, it spread in all directions. On the other hand, Naito seemed calmer. He was more interested in watching Minato finally meeting the fourth Raikage and the others. After getting the final research results from Orochimaru and deduced the method to enhance the soul with pure chakra, Naito went directly to the nearest village in the land of Bez. It's the same method that has been explained in the original. If you want to open the second stage of the soul art, you will naturally need to go through the actual operation. The Hoshi meteorite that descended from the sky contains an extremely powerful chakra. Of course, that amount of chakra is nothing to Naito. It is important that he gets his hand on a pure source of chakra that doesn't have any soul. Only a free chakra can be used to nourish and strengthen the soul. The ninjas in Rorin are incomparably weak. They use the chakra-enhancing radiation from the meteorite, but they can't even bear its power. Even if they get 10 times stronger using the Hoshi, it's nothing to Naito. As Naito knows, this chakra can even distort time and space. Of course, since this is just the beginning of the soul development, it's better if he uses weaker chakra. Thus, Naito set Hoshi as his first goal. Hoshigaku's ninjas are too weak compared to Naito. There wasn't any kind of resistance. It's just a joke that they want to make their village as strong as the 6 major villages. Moreover, they use the mysterious peacock method to enhance their chakra. However, the disadvantages of this technique are far greater than the benefits. This is one of the reasons that none of the major villages is using that technique. If Metron can improve the ninja's strength without side effects and makes a small village become one of the majors, the others would already take it away from their hands. After he acquired the Metron, Naito wasn't far from the cloud battlefield, so he continued developing his soul art technique while rushing over toward this place. Unexpectedly, he saw this scene where Minato and the fourth Hokage were facing each other. He could also see Kakashi Bello, who was also watching him with a hint of surprise, and a trace of respect revealed in his eyelids. On the side, Rin and Obito were looking strangely at Naito. They didn't feel anything special about him. However, somehow, he made both their sensei and the fourth Hokage stop. "Hey, Kakashi, who is this fellow?" Obito couldn't bear it any longer and whispered to Kakashi. Even Rin on his side looked curious. Kakashi turned at him with a trace of awe on his expression and said, "He's you Naito or not?" "You? Naito?" Obito couldn't believe what he heard, and with an incredible look on his face, he looked up again to see Naito. This guy who has nothing special about him is the legendary god of shinobi. Obito was still in disbelief, although he saw Kakashi and Minato's reactions. This guy doesn't seem any special. When Naito attacked the Uchiha clan, Obito was still a child. After that incident, the Uchiha clan has finally understood the gap between them and Naito. If he wanted, he could even destroy them at that time. Thus, they decided to leave all of that behind. The Uchiha clan concealed all the information about that incident, even the fact that Naito has killed their former head clan was covered. Just like the village decided, they claimed that they were attacked by some mysterious enemies. The Uchiha clan has completely abandoned the idea of considering Naito as an enemy. They knew their level, and how weak they were compared to Naito. Nothing they can do will shake him, and making him an enemy will just end up with them destroyed. The moment he stepped to the peak of the world, even Naito has forgotten about it all. Except for Madara and other individual members, the other Uchiha clan are just passers-by. "What with this arrogant attitude, you bastard?" The fourth Hokage couldn't bear the way that Naito was standing on the treetop so casually. The fact that he didn't even look at him made the former angrier. Naito was still looking at Minato even though he screamed at him. The fourth Hokage became furious, suddenly stepped so hard on the ground, and rushed toward Naito. Covered by lightning over his whole body, the Hokage thought about attacking Naito to make him land on the ground just to ease his anger. So fast. Kakashi looked shocked by his movements. He was a Jonin and the best at using the lightning release and speed. However, he could barely see the Hokage's movements. Moreover, even if he could see it, he doesn't have the speed to react at the time. If the Hokage decided to attack him with such an attack, he would get hit directly. He wouldn't even have the time to use a substitution technique. The only person here, who can face the fourth Hokage in addition to Naito, is Minato. If Kakashi can barely see the Hokage's movements, then, he's entirely invisible for Obito and Rin on the side. The way they saw this scene was quite different. They didn't know when did the Hokage move, but he suddenly appeared in front of you Naito. What is this terrifying speed? Both of them looked like they got struck by a lightning bolt. Very fast. The fourth Hokage chakra broke out. He threw a big one while he was rushing at incredible speed toward Naito. Naito was standing in the same place from the beginning to the end. It looked like if he was utterly incapable of reacting under the Hokage's speed. Watching this scene made the Hokage sneer in his heart. His speed has finally exceeded his father's, and surely Naito is entirely helpless in front of him. If a strong ninja gets crushed in terms of speed, he will not have a chance to exert his power and will die under the Raikage's iron fist. Suddenly, the Raikage's fist hit Naito's body. However, something was weird. The Raikage didn't feel like he has hit a hard surface. Midway, when the Raikage saw how Naito was helpless in front of his speed, he changed his plan and decided that once he hit Naito with his fist, he won't give Naito any opportunity to fall back, and directly throw at him a barrage of punches and kill him. But what the Raikage didn't expect, is that his first attack will pass straight through Naito's body. It's as if Naito has turned into a ghost. What? The moment his fist failed to make contact with Naito's body, the expression on the Raikage's face suddenly changed. That smirk got wiped off his face as he looked shocked by this event. Slowly the Raikage passed right through Naito, while the former suddenly smirked. The Raikage was clenching his teeth with a hint of incredulous and disbelief in his eyes. It was so hard on him to turn around and look at Naito behind him. What made it difficult is the fact that Naito was faster. What shocked him the most is that he has just used his full speed to attack Naito. However, the Raikage couldn't even touch Naito. Against that speed, Naito has just dodged his attack, then came back to his place. That incredible speed he used has allowed him to leave a perfect afterimage in his original position, which is simply unbelievable. Not willing to give the Raikage any more opportunities to attack, just when he was about to turn back and try his luck again, Naito hit the Raikage's body with a finger flick. Boom! With a finger flick, Naito destroyed the Raikage's lightning armor, then he got slammed directly, from the air to the ground. In the process, the Raikage desperately wanted to use his fists to block Naito's attack, but he couldn't react at the right timing. His speed compared to Naito's is not just a little bit worse, but the gap is almost the same between heaven and earth. The whole process seems to belong, but in reality, all of this happened in just a few moments. Among the people present, only Minato could see Naito's movements, even Kakashi couldn't see what happened. He couldn't help but look at his sensei, to find him revealing an incredible expression. If he's facing the Raikage speed, Minato has confidence that if he relies on the Flying Thunder God, he would easily dodge his punch, then launch a counter-attack. However, against Naito, he may only and barely avoid him, but he wouldn't be able to start a counter-attack. In a close-range fight, Minato knew that if he moves to another position with his space technique, Naito will just appear behind him. And even if he uses it again, Naito will just keep chasing him every time. This is how incredible Naito's speed is. With the sixth gate open, and the use of the moonwalk technique, his speed in short distances is like teleporting. Boom! The Raikage's body hit the ground like a cannonball, he directly shattered it. And in just a few moments, the cracks filled the entire place. What speed? Is this true power of the Raikage? Obito and Rin could barely see the Raikage rushing to the treetop, then in an instant, they saw a figure crushed on the ground. Both of them looked terrified. Rin and Obito didn't expect the Cloud Village Raikage to be this strong. Even the legendary god of Shinobi got defeated by him. However, in the next moment, the two of them became more horrified. Because the person who got crushed on the ground wasn't Naito, it was the person who rushed to him. The Raikage was on the ground, and Naito was still standing on the treetop. How is this possible? What is going on? Both of them were unable to suppress the shock in their hearts and ended up exclaiming. It was clear that the person who was winning is the Raikage, then why did he get bombarded? Hardly they raised their head to look again at Naito, who was standing calmly on the treetop. Even Kakashi was shocked, although he could barely see the Raikage's movements. He knew that the person who got crushed on the ground was none but him. There's only one explanation to this: Naito is much faster than the Raikage. Much, much faster. Only at a higher speed he would manage to avoid him, then counterattack and blast him on the ground. Aniki. Killer Bee has barely managed to see what happened. His eyes under his sunglasses have also revealed a trace of stunning color. However, he rushed immediately to check on the Raikage. At the same time, his heart was overwhelmed with endless jealousy looking at Naito. This guy's speed is even faster than his big brother the Raikage. How is that possible? In his point of view, the Raikage is the fastest in the world. Namikaze Minato is just a space technique user, it's not his pure body speed. But Naito, with his pure body speed, crushed the Raikage in terms of speed. That guy seems dangerous. You have to be careful. The Hokage couldn't help but warn B about Naito's hidden powers. The chakra in Naito's body felt even more than what he has. The chakra flowing in his body was like a sea of oceans, merely unfathomable. I know. B nodded sincerely. This time, he didn't dare to make a joke. The Raikage crawled out of the pit, while the blood was overflowing out of the corner of his mouth. He clenched his teeth and looked at Naito above with incredible expression. This is impossible. Impossible. This speed. I originally wasn't planning on participating, I only came here expecting to see a wonderful fight. I didn't think you will choose to attack me. I guess I ended up ruining my chance to see it. Naito, who was still standing on the treetop, opened. Whoosh. Suddenly, Naito flashed from the treetop and disappeared, then instantly, appeared again below in front of Minato and the others. Rin and Obito were both shocked by the sudden appearance of Naito. And they couldn't help but step back, widening their eyes. They were incredibly looking at Naito. Kakashi barely maintained his calm, but with a glimpse of surprise in his eyes. Sure enough, Naito's movements are intractable for him. It's fast enough to the degree where he can only catch the end of it. It's like Sensei's flying thunder god. Looking at the sudden appearance of Naito made Minato smile a bit, then said, I thought that after I learned the flying thunder god, I would finally be able to surpass you in this one thing. I didn't expect. It's only for short distances. Naito turned at Minato and whispered, saying, there's nothing I can do to beat your flying thunder god in long distances. When Minato heard what Naito said, he smiled and shook his head. For a moment, his heart was full of mixed feelings, and he could only sigh. At the same time, the fourth Raikage in the distance looked furious, full of anger. The madness in his eyes was evident. He simply couldn't believe the fact that he got crushed by Naito. He thought that his crazy speed will make him the fastest in the world, and relying on that speed, he was planning on crushing every ninja in the world and even defeating Naito. But just now, he lost the fight in terms of speed. He knew he cannot be compared to Naito in terms of attack and defense, but now even his speed is far less than him. The only thing he was confident about, Naito crushed it right in front of his eyes, along with every hope he had. He's far from being on the same level as you, Naito, who killed his father. How can the fourth Raikage accept that? Of course, he couldn't. All the hope and confidence in his heart got into anger and madness, and suddenly his heart sunk in hatred. Suddenly his chakra burst out violently and pushed B, who was helping him get up. The Raikage's body got covered once again with lightning, then he rushed straight toward Naito while biting his teeth, swinging his fist. Boom! The thunder and lightning coming out of his body were violent and frenzy. The surrounding air was flashing with electric arcs, emitting a horrifying sound. If such a punch is gonna fall on a person, it will directly penetrate his body. However, in the face of this terrifying punch, Naito didn't even swing his fist. One finger felt enough for Naito to stop the fourth Raikage's punch. Suddenly, the Raikage's punch came in contact with Naito's finger. In an instant, the lightning burst out violently. However, it didn't last a second before it collapsed and faded away. Even the Raikage's lightning armor got also shattered from his fist to his arm, then to his entire body. The expression on the Raikage's face was full of despair and disbelief. He has just swung a full force punch, and it got stopped by one finger from Naito, but wasn't the end. Suddenly, the Raikage's body has once again got sent flying, with his back digging in the ground for the whole distance. However, he didn't stop even when he hit a big tree. It got destroyed, then he continued flying backward. After smashing several large trees in a row, he barely stopped. Everyone saw this scene. But processing it was another story. This simply doesn't make sense to anyone. No one can imagine the fourth Raikage of the Cloud Village himself getting a beating by a finger. How can a small finger burst out such a horrible power? The Raikage came fast, then got sent flying backward even quicker. Killer Bee couldn't even react, nor catch the Raikage. He could only watch him flying out in the distance. Damn! You bastard! Killer Bee was horrified, and at the same time, angry. Looking at Naito standing there calmly, he could no longer hold it anymore. The Hokage's chakra burst out, then a huge octopus tail suddenly fell on Naito. Seeing this scene, made Naito's eyes flash a little, then say, the Hokage's strength is stronger than other Baijua. Without any hesitation, Naito clenched his fist and swung it directly. Whoosh! The space in front of him seemed to be distorted from the power of this punch. Even the light got forcibly reversed, and a terrible fist mark suddenly appeared on the space. The moment this fist collided with the Hokage's tentacles, it shattered it directly, leaving nothing but aches behind it. What is even more shocking is that the traces of distortion didn't stop and instantly spread into the endless distance toward the sky, hitting a white cloud. Suddenly, it penetrated it violently, bursting out the mark of Naito's fist. What a shocking and incredible scene! Naito has just pierced the sky with his fist. At that moment, everyone looked up at the sky as if they were petrified. Killer Bee didn't even dare to move an inch after that. Kakashi, the others, and even Minato were all stunned. Silence controlled the place. Obito and Rin have even lost the ability to think. Because one thought was running in their minds. Is Naito a god? Time seemed like it got frozen. It felt as if they kept looking at the sky for decades. Suddenly, the sky in the distance flashed with signal flares. At that moment, Minato has finally woke up. In the distant sky, Konoha's signal flare blasted open the sky, representing a unique signal that the Cloud Village has launched an attack. Bang! The distant land began to tremble. Even if you're far away, you can feel the Baijua horrible chakra raging over there. It's the Nibi. The Cloud Village has two Baijua, the Hokage, and the Nibi. Even though Killer Bee, the current Jinchuriki, can perfectly control the Hokage, this wasn't the case for the previous generations of his Jinchurikis. Every time the Hokage does a rampage, he gets suppressed by the third Raikage. As for the Nibi, the current Jinchuriki is not as good as Matatabi in the original, who can entirely control her Baijua. Therefore, the Nibi is often violent. If he cannot be controlled, it is better to use him on the frontal battlefield. There's not a lot of flexibility in using the Nibi's powers. It seems that the Cloud Village has launched an attack. Well, it's not a surprise since the Raikage is personally here. Naito looked far away. With the use of his Ultra Perceive, he barely managed to sense Konoha's forces fighting with the clouds. After he took a glance at the battlefield, Naito suddenly flashed and disappeared on the horizon. Originally, Minato was about to use his Flying Thunder God technique to return quickly and support Konoha's forces on the battlefield, but after he saw this scene, he stopped his action with a little relief. Even if he goes back, he won't be able to entirely rely on the Thunder Flying God technique to stop the Nibibe. It's difficult to defeat him, and he might even get crushed by his powers. The power that Naito has just revealed was extremely shocking to Minato. Even his Rasengan is hugely inferior to Naito's strength. Minato feels that even if he completes developing his Rasengan with the change of the chakra natural, and makes it even more stronger, it's still difficult to be compared to Naito's shock force. His strength has reached an almost unbelievable level. Moreover, Naito's speed in a short distance is not inferior to the rate of his Flying Thunder God technique, coupled with how he's almost immune to Genjutsu, which makes Minato feel kind of envious. He doesn't know if he should feel happy or unfortunate by the era he was born in. Even if there were even more powerful people or geniuses like Minato, there's no chance for any one of them to bloom beyond Naito. This era belongs to one man, Naito. Almost instantaneously, Naito arrived at the front line of the battlefield. Both sides have dispatched thousands of ninjas, but the better side was the Cloud with the power of the Nibi. However, Shikakunara's wisdom is almost incomparable on Konoha's side. Even without Minato, he has been dragging the Nibi around with various strategies, and also has a slight advantage in the frontal battlefield. But even so, Shikaku didn't have any ease in his heart, but continuous anxiety. Is Minato still not here? Maybe he didn't see the signal flare. Otherwise, he would have used the Flying Thunder God technique immediately and came to the battlefield. Being responsible for Konoha's army, Inoichi Yamanaka said. Shikaku frowned upon hearing this sentence. Although he can temporarily hold the Nibi's advancement, this wasn't a long-term solution. Once the Nibi breaks free and uses his strength, he will cause massive casualties. The power of the Baijua is tough to handle. The only man who we can rely on to deal with the Nibi is Minato. Shikaku kept quiet for a long time. He was ready to ask Inoichi to use his secret technique to forcibly communicate with Minato and ask him to come back immediately. However, in the next moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the battlefield. The sudden appearance of this figure attracted the attention of countless people. When he first saw this figure, Shikaku was shocked, then he immediately sighed with relief. He finally came. Even with Minato's arrival, they could only hold back the Nibi. They cannot entirely reverse the situation on the battlefield. There's only one person who can do that, Naito. It's him. Why did he come here? The Raikage and Killer Bee are not here yet. We cannot block him just with Nibi's power. The Cloud Shine Abyss looked at Naito, who appeared in the sky. After they recognized his identity, they got all a little scared and confused. However, some people didn't believe in the rumors and stories they heard about Naito. Indeed, they can be some good stories for kids, but accepting them is something else. Although Naito has killed the third Raikage, and the former could suppress the Hokage's rampages several times, but it wasn't an easy task even on him. Not necessarily, don't believe those rumors, people tend to exaggerate things. It's not easy for a human being to defeat a Baijua. Even if he defeated a Baijua before, it will take from him a lot of time and work to do it. The commander of the Cloud Force's eyes flashed with jealousy as he kept watching Naito. Contact the Raikage and Killer Bee immediately, the situation has changed. Naito has come to the battlefield. Yes. The Shinobi instantly started to contact the Raikage and Killer Bee. At the same time, the Nibi, whose Jinchuriki could barely control him, was violently moving on the battlefield. The moment he noticed Naito, he roared, and leaped directly toward the sky, rushing to Naito. Okay, let him deal with him for the time being. The Cloud's commander looked at this scene, then took a deep breath, ready to continue commanding the forces on the frontal battlefield. But in the next moment, his expression suddenly changed. The strength of the Nibi is much worse than the Hokage, but his flexibility is quite good. Standing in the sky, Naito took a glimpse at the Nibi, then he extended his hand toward him and gently pressed it against the air. This movement looked pointless since it looked like he didn't put any strength in it. Whoosh! But in the next moment, the power of a horrible shock force slammed down, and suddenly the shape of a large hand appeared on the space under him. The huge handprint suddenly slammed the Nibi as if it was catching a kitten, and the Nibi, who has just jumped up to the sky, got pressed instantly on the ground. Bang! The madness spread on the ground, destroying it. For a second, the whole battlefield trembled, stopping the movements of every Shinobi on it, forcing them to look directly at the direction of the sound. When the dust settled, everyone could no longer take a single breath. There was a significant handprint on the ground, surrounded by dense cracks. At the center of that hand, there was no trace of the Nibi, just his Jinchuriki lying there dead. He smacked the Nibi. Sanju Hashirama used to easily suppress the Kyuubi. It's only simple that Naito can suppress the Nibi, but still, it shocked everyone on the battlefield. Even Narashikaku, who had known Naito for a long time, couldn't help but show a shocking color. The intelligence he read, and what he has just seen with his eyes are entirely different. It seems that the war is coming to an end. Looking at the scene where Naito's palm was shaped on the ground with the Nibi's Jinchuriki in the middle, Shikakunara showed a hint of respect. Naito has conquered all the battlefields against the rock, the sand, and the mist. Among these three, the loss of the mist was the most serious. Not only that, their Baijua got caught, but also they lost the 7 legendary swordsmen. Although, as long as they still have the actual 7 weapons, they can always select new handlers, they will never be as good as the original team, at least not at the beginning. Besides, although the rock village acts like it's not serious, their 2 Baijua got caught at the same time, and the 3rd Sushikage has not dared to fight back. As for the sand, the 4th Kazekage personally participated in the battlefield and got blocked by Sakumo several times, then Naito came and defeated their Baijua. The only side that remained is the Cloud. It can be said that Naito is the one who conquered the Third World War. Such a record, such a force, Shikaku could only think about one person who could have all of this a long time ago. The terminator of the Warring States period, the creator of the nation village system, and the establisher of Konoha, the first Hokage, and the god of Shinobi, Senju Hashirama. Shikaku couldn't help but look at Naito in the sky with respect. After this war, he's truly no longer a half-god, but at the same height as the first Hokage. Standing in the sky, after defeating the Nibi, Naito faintly glanced at the battlefield below. At this time, both sides were still frozen in their places. However, The morale of the cloud side was on the verge of collapsing after they watched the Nibi get easily defeated. The army commander's forehead was dripping with cold sweat, his back was soaked. Looking at the sky, his heart was overwhelmed with endless fear, and he could barely stand still, praying for the arrival of the fourth Hokage to be soon. However, at the next moment, a pale-faced ninja suddenly appeared next to him and said a few words with a trembled tone. "What?" These words made the sword in his hand fall on the ground. His face also became pale for a moment, and he couldn't help but widen his eyes in disbelief. The fourth Hokage and Killer Bee. "Got." He raised his head once again in fear at the sky to look at Naito. Suddenly, he gave the order and disappeared. It didn't take much longer after that for the Cloud Army, who has finally collapsed, to retreat. Then Konoha's army started chasing them. For such a long time, they kept hoping that Minato will come at the right time and somehow manage to defeat the Nibi, but even with the help of Naruto's commandment, it would have been impossible for them to deal with the Hokage when he comes out. Shukaku couldn't help but sigh in relief. While chasing the defeated Cloud, Konoha Shinobis felt ultimate respect for Naito. Standing in the sky, Naito looked at the Cloud's army, who fled, and Konoha's Shinobis, who were chasing them. After he shook his head slightly, Naito was ready to leave the place. However, just when he was about to leave, he suddenly blinked, then he frowned with a stern expression. Naito could see every corner of the battlefield from where he was standing. Just when he was about to leave, he suddenly noticed that someone was missing. If it was anyone, or even thousands of Konoha Shinobis, Naito wouldn't care, but this person that has disappeared was Uchiha Obito. From the beginning, Naito paid more attention to Obito since he was an important character. The amount of attention he gave him was even higher than Kakashi. Kakashi has returned to the battlefield and was chasing the enemies with Konoha's army. Rin was also here, but Obito was missing. It seems that something unexpected happened. Naito slightly wrinkled his brows. Then he suddenly flickered from the sky and came to the ground. Under his ultra-perceive, he could sense the entire battlefield, every corner was clear in his mind, he could perceive even the movements of every ant in the range of 10 miles. After a quick search, Naito found some strange traces. The traces of a unique earth technique that can penetrate the ground. Naito was familiar with these traces, there shouldn't be any doubt about this. It's Zetsu. Naito cannot always use his ultra-perceive since it exhausts his mind. It seems that when Naito was dealing with the Nibi, Zetsu suddenly appeared and kidnapped Obito. Naito was confused by this strange change of event. Why would Madara take away Obito? There's no doubt that the story got changed entirely by the appearance of Naito. Still, it's not clear what Madara is planning in the dark anymore. As soon as he thought of Madara, Naito's eyes suddenly slightly flashed with stunning color. The blood rushed into his brain as the idea flashed in his mind. From the place he was standing on, he condensed the shock force under his feet, and without even kicking the ground, it collapsed beneath him. Suddenly he fell directly into the pit that he created. Whoosh! After falling to the ground, Naito was glowing with a faded white light. If you look closely, that aura around his body was shattering the walls around him and opening the way to him. The underground didn't stop Naito from tracking the traces that Zetsu left back. Although the speed of moving in the ground was much slower than outside, it's still relative to Naito. For other ninjas, it's almost unbelievable. Naito didn't know how far he dug underground. Finally, when the traces disappeared, he sensed a massive cave in the distance. The moment he sensed that cave, Naito flicked directly, leaving the underground that was continually collapsing. He seemed like a stream of light, running through the endless layers of the earth and at top speed rushing to the underground cave. The deep underground cave was surrounded by hard rock walls, but still, it was slightly damp. The cave was very huge, and it's not apparent whether it is naturally formed or artificially opened up. At the next moment, at the end of the cave, the rock walls burst open, and a figure wrapped in a white aura suddenly rushed into the cave. Whoosh! The shock force around Naito's body disappeared slowly. He didn't know how far he drilled underground, but sure it took him a while. Still, there was no trace of mud on his body, it got all shattered by his shock force. There wasn't even a trace of stain on Naito's white cloak. Naito calmly glanced around, then he used his Ultra Perceive to search for every living thing inside these caves. After he took a deep breath, a deep sigh appeared in his eyelids. Then he slowly walked forward for a while, and came to a bigger cave. There was someone inside the cave, sitting there, looking at Naito. Behind that figure, there was a massive statue with huge black pipes extended from it, and inserted into the back of that person. This statue was the demonic statue of the outer path. And that person connected to it was Uchiha Madara. It took him a very long time, but he finally found Madara's location. Step by step, Naito walked toward Madara. He didn't speak but kept looking at Madara quietly. The way he was walking gave Naito an imposing appearance. Madara sat there quietly watching Naito coming over. His body was very old, to the point that he looked like a corpse. However, the look in his eyes looked so sharp, to the point where it can even pierce the heart. The meeting of these two is the collision of two eras. The last era belonged to Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, and this era belongs to you, Naito. Whoosh! None of them spoke a word, their auras were doing all the talk, they were crushing each other and violently colliding, which made even the dust around the place raise and roll in all directions. The time seemed to be stagnated, although there's almost no light here, it's as if everything in the whole world is centered around this. Behind him on the side, Zetsu was standing there, with Obito next to him unconscious, watching the momentum between Naito and Madara with evident awe in his eyelids. The confrontation between these two gave him the feeling that the world is about to end. The air is continually humming as if some kind of invisible wave marks in the space are rippling. Suddenly, the ground between Naito and Madara cracked. With the sixth gate opened, Naito's strength has reached the extreme of the elite Kage level. Even if it's the sixth path himself, it would have been difficult for him to directly crush Naito. Moreover, Naito's soul is also powerful. Even if he doesn't have any special dojutsu, Naito's presence was extremely horrifying. Although Madara's body is almost on the verge of giving up, and he's relying on the demonic statue of the outer path to extend his lifespan, connecting it to his body by the black receivers. He once stood proudly at the peak of the world. Madara had Hashirama's cells transplanted in him, and he already awakened the Rinnegan. Although he gave them to Nagato, his body still has some of its power in it. In the original, when he got resurrected by the outer path, he could use Susanoo even with the absence of his Sharingan. You can only say that his arrogance comes from how strong he is. At this time, Madara had a pair of ordinary 3-tomo Sharingan, but an ordinary Sharingan placed in Madara's eyes can no longer be considered average. Madara tried to suppress Naito with his presence and strong aura, but he couldn't do it, or that he couldn't do it under this state. In terms of momentum, Naito is not inferior to Madara, as passerby to this world, and with the soul art secret, Naito's soul is really powerful. coupled with his spiritual shock technique, his momentum is not weaker than Madara. Gradually, both their momentum slowly dispersed. Looking at Madara in front of him, Naito didn't directly attack. Killing him in this state doesn't make any sense. Whether it's the Rinnegan or the Edo Tensei, there are too many techniques that revive the dead. Unless he can destroy the person's soul, killing him now is useless. Moreover, Naito knew that Madara intended to bring him here on purpose. How would Madara make such a mistake, to send Zetsu to take someone on the same battlefield where Naito has appeared, thus exposing his position? Moreover, Madara looked like he was waiting for Naito's arrival. After Hashirama, I thought that this world will gradually fade. I felt that it was difficult for the world to reproduce anything near Hashirama or me. I didn't expect that this era will have someone like you. Madara looked at Naito with a deep gaze, then slowly opened his mouth, with a trembled tone. Naito looked faintly. He didn't refute Madara's words but calmly said, "The world is constantly changing. Time doesn't stop for anyone, era and era unceasingly take turns. I respect the older generation, but you who belong to the previous era, I have to say, you're a loser." Madara listened to what Naito had to say without the slightest anger. Naito held his hand and stood calmly, looking at Madara. He said, "You couldn't control the world in your time. So you've made a plan to make a comeback on the next one. This is the practice of losers, isn't it? If you're as strong as you think, you would have won against Senju Hashirama." While his eyes looked deep and calm, Madara said, "The world thinks that I've lost to Hashirama. He tried to stop me several times. There were times when he won some fights, and there were times where he didn't. However, I still exist, but Hashirama has long passed away. The real result is obvious when you see it this way, isn't it?" Madara looked at him and responded faintly while using the same tone as Naito. "When you know what my will is, what are you gonna do?" At some point, Madara's tone hit a spot of oppression. It seemed as if the air around them became burdensome, and the pressure gradually spread. However, this pressure did not affect Naito. The field seems to be divided into two distinct worlds, Madara's world and Naito's world. Two people divided the entire world. Hashirama ended the Warring States period with his hands, but not everything he ideals has come true. He died, leaving a constant war in the Shinobi world, and there's no such a thing as peace. The First Shinobi World War, the Second Shinobi World War, and even a third one. No one was provoked by me to start all of this. Maybe the first time the war happened due to my actions, but I have nothing to do with human greed that drives them to slaughter, wage wars, and plunder money and resources." Madara looked at Naito, while his eyes seemed deep and ethereal. "What I want to do is to end it all. Stop the world and let it disappear from this world along with pain. These things Hashirama couldn't do. This is my will." Listening to what Madara had to say, these words didn't shake Naito. He kept his whole focus on Madara. Still, he seemed very calm. If Naito wasn't passerby from the modern world, and if he didn't already know everything about this world, he would have certainly gotten shaken by this great speech from Madara. However, Naito wasn't a Bito. This is not gonna work on him. Moreover, he didn't care about what happened to the world. Naito wasn't Hashirama, nor Madara. He didn't care about bringing peace and protecting the world. He only wants for his people to be safe, and for himself, he wanted freedom. He wanted to get rid of all constraints. Indeed, this way, you can truly beat Hashirama. Naito whispered, which made a smug grin appear on Madara's face, thinking that Naito has understood him. but the next sentence made the entire field shroud in endless coldness. Still, I'm not interested in all of this. Naito stared at Madara, and while revealing his cold killing intent, he said these words. I don't care about anything you will do, but if you even think about crossing your sword with me, or hurting the people around me, I'll kill you. No matter how strong Madara is in his heydays, in his current state, and with the absence of the Rinnegan, he can't confront Naito. Regardless of the reason that made Madara bring Naito to meet him. Since he's here, Naito wasn't gonna show him the slightest mercy. However, just when Naito was ready to make his move, Madara shook his head. Sure enough, people who don't know real pain cannot understand this, but it doesn't matter anymore. Whether you understand and cooperate with me or not is not important. Either way, I will need to take the Kyuubi from you. You can't have it for yourself, it's an important part of my plan. Madara faintly said, and just by the end of his sentence, the white smoke spurt in the place, then he disappeared. This scene made Naito stunned. It's not just Madara who disappeared, even the demonic statues vanished with him at the same time. This is... Looking at this scene, Naito frowned. How can the enormous demonic statue disappear? Wait. Kyuubi. Plan. It all came to him at the same time, which made the expression on Naito's face change. Suddenly, he revealed a horrifying killing intent that made the whole place surrounding him shatter, the cracks begin to spread in all directions like a spider web. Even the surrounding hard rock walls had cracks, and they looked like they were about to collapse. The next moment, without any hesitation, Naito stepped hardly on the ground, and with his body covered with white aura, he directly hit the side of the wall. Just like cutting into silk, Naito was moving inside the walls quickly. He didn't care if it was gonna make the entire surface collapse, he needed to reach the top. Suddenly he reached the surface of the ground, then flashed toward the sky. Now he can move at high speed. The Rain Land, the outside of the Rain Village. The dark clouds shrouded the entire sky, and the atmosphere seemed to be extremely heavy and oppressive. In this repression, there were two horrible erupting momentums. In one direction, a huge figure surging a violent golden chakra. In its core, Kushina was standing. In the other direction, Nagato, with his Rinnegan exuding a horrible aura, was standing a strange and sturdy beast, with black sticks pierced in his body. Kushina-sensei. On the edge of the battlefield, Kanon stood there worried. Nagato suddenly attacked the Rain Village, with the speed of light. The Nanabi was directly suppressed. Tsunade wasn't in the village, it seems that she was gambling outside, and it's been a long time since Naito has left the village. Thus, Kushina tried to stop him. Although with the power of the Kyuubi, Kushina is not inferior to Nagato, the power of the Rinnegan has the upper hand against the Baijua's force, so it was a difficult fight for Kushina. Whoosh! With full control under the Kyuubi's chakra, Kushina grew up with some huge claws and grabbed Nagato, trying to crush him. Shinra Tensei. With a cold stare on his face, Nagato screamed. Whoosh! An invisible shock instantly smashed and shattered the chakra claws. Nagato was the one fighting, not Pain. Not only that he can use all the abilities of Six Paths Pain, but also each ability is stronger. This guy is strong, Kushina said with a severe expression. It's the power of the old man Rikudo. Fortunately, this little kid can't control the real power of the Rinnegan. Otherwise, you would have already lost. Kurama said at Kushina. I know. Kushina nodded and looked at Nagato, and said in a deep tone, Nagato, I know all about you. I believe your idea is wrong. You should hurry up and stop this madness. When he heard Kushina, Nagato looked indifferently. The look in his eyes felt cold, and nothing Kushina will say was gonna make him stop. You're also a member of the Uzumaki clan, you've experienced the downfall of your clan, you should understand pain. Nagato made a gesture of binding and calmly said, people who understand pain should also yearn for peace. Which makes me feel like your understanding of pain is not profound. Suddenly a small black ball appeared on Nagato's fingertip, then it rose into the sky. Chibaku Tensei. Boom! A horrible spurt of force spread in all directions, directly shattering the thick black clouds in the sky. Even the raindrops that were falling to the ground suddenly stagnated in the air, then their path got deflected toward the center of that black ball. Even the sun's light could no longer spill on Earth after it got entirely obscured by the black ball. The ground began to crack, and countless stones started to fly into the sky as they were attracted continuously by that black ball. This repulsive gravitational force also affected Kushina's body, pulling her to its center. Not good. As an Uzumaki, Kushina, who is proficient in all types of seal, noticed, from first glance, that this was some kind of seal ninjutsu. Once you get sucked in it, it will wrap you inside, sealing you, and it will be tough to break free. Without hesitation, Kushina instantly opened Kurama complete mode, then gathered and condensed a vast amount of chakra, and turned it into a Baiju Udama. The Baiju Udama flew directly to the sky, and suddenly it collided with it. Whoosh! At this moment, it seemed as if the sun itself got exploded. The whole world got covered with white light, which made the rain shine. Abyss in the village couldn't help but close their eyes. When everything stopped, ruins of all types were falling from the sky like raindrops. Apparently, that black ball got entirely smashed by the Baiju Udama. Looking at this scene, everyone else's beside Kushina and Nagato felt powerless. The gap between them is too high. The two of them have the power to easily wipe out the entire village along with them. When Kanon saw how Kushina stopped Nagato's attack, she felt slightly relieved. Then when she looked at Nagato, and how he looked, she couldn't help but clench her fists. Nagato. Why it has to be this way? The explosion of the black ball made a big hole in the center of the clouds above Nagato and Kushina. The sunlight poured down from it on both of them as if they were the center of the entire world. However, the black clouds in the distance were slowly filling in, and that massive hole in the sky gradually disappeared, and that depressed atmosphere from before began to pervade. Is this the power of the Kyuubi? Nagato didn't even take a glance at the sky, but calmly looked at Kushina. I didn't expect that you have the power to destroy that one. In this case, I will just use a bigger one. The next moment, Nagato did a hand sign with both hands in a try to release a stronger Chibaku Tensei. But at that moment, his expression stagnated, and suddenly, he changed the seal. Summoning technique. Jidomazo, demonic statue of the outer path. Puuchi. The white smoke suddenly spurted out, and a monster more significant than the Kyuubi appeared in the field. It's the demonic statue and the vessel of the Kyuubi. When the demonic statue appeared, the Kyuubi's expression suddenly changed and screamed. The Jidomazo. We're in trouble. No, the real trouble is that guy. Kushina shook her head, then severely, she looked at the figure above the Jidomazo. That person wasn't Nagato, he seemed extremely old for him. Black pipes on his back were connecting him to the demonic statue. However, his eyes looked deep and sharp, giving him an evil, dark aura that makes you feel like if he's the center of all sinister events in this world. Buzz. Although he was old and weak, he stood there in an imposing manner. You still didn't catch the Kyuubi yet? Madara, who was standing on the demonic statue, faintly opened. Nagato looked confused. He didn't expect Madara to appear like this. The Kyuubi's Jinchuriki is unexpectedly strong, but it's only a matter of time. You're too slow, leave it to me, you can leave. Otherwise, that man will show up, and you're not strong enough to deal with him. Madara said. Although he didn't mention his name, Nagato knew whom Madara was talking about, which revealed a hint of jealousy in his eyes. But your body? It's nothing, I've been holding back for a long time. Now I need to do this last thing before my death. Madara said calmly. Nagato took a deep breath, then nodded and squinted away. Only Madara and Kushina were in the field. The moment he looked at her, Madara's eyes flashed with a glimmer. No wonder Nagato couldn't finish this quickly. He didn't expect this little girl to be able to control the Kyuubi's chakra perfectly. You're a worthy descendant of Mito. You can even control the Kyuubi's chakra. When she heard these words, Kushina finally confirmed his identity. Mito Uzumaki, the wife of the first Hokage, and the Kyuubi's previous Jinchuriki. This man talked about her as if he knew her, so there's no doubt about it. He's Uchiha Madara. Naito has told Kushina everything about Madara and how he's not dead. However, the Kyuubi is not something you should keep for yourself, so give to me. Madara gazed at her with a glimpse of coldness and arrogance in his eyelids. He was confident, even though he was facing a Jinchuriki who could perfectly control the Kyuubi's chakra, and his current state was so bad that he must rely on the demonic statue to barely stay alive. His expression was as arrogant as ever. As if everything in the world was in his hand. Roar! Suddenly, the Jidomazo roared at Kushina. Kushina! Don't fight him, wait for Naito to come back. Looking at Madara and the demonic statue, Kurama advised Kushina not to fight them. Upon hearing him, Kushina nodded him, then she immediately turned from Kurama's form to Kyuubi chakra mode, then quickly retreated. It's useless. Madara looked at Kushina running toward the village. He bit his thumb, then pressed his hand on the head of the demonic statue. Summoning technique. Whoosh! Suddenly, Kushina's movements stagnated, then her entire body trembled as Kurama's chakra inside her body went out of control. Madara could still summon the Kyuubi because of the forced contract he signed. He couldn't directly summon him because he's bonded to his Jinchuriki. However, the summoning technique interfered with Kurama's chakra flow inside Kushina's body and stagnated her for a moment. Suddenly, the demonic statue's hand moved and grabbed Kushina. Damn! Kurama roared inside Kushina, and she didn't have a choice but to re-enter the full form. Although, turning to the complete form helped her get rid of the demonic's grip on her. But he still managed to catch on of the Kyuubi's tails and slammed him on the ground. Bang! The Kyuubi then turned his head and bit the demonic statue's hand that was firmly grasping his tail. The Kyuubi was struggling hard to get rid of his grip. However, the other hand suddenly moved and nailed his neck to the ground. Madara was watching this scene with a faint look as if he had already everything in his hands. Although the order of absorption must be respected, I'll just use the Jidomazo to temporarily seal the Kyuubi, it won't be a problem. Roar! Suddenly, the Jidomazo opened his mouth, and the chakra chains extended out and penetrated the Kyuubi's body. Kushina screamed in pain, as the Kyuubi's chakra was pulled out of her body. Damn it! Kushina panicked, but she wasn't gonna give up and immediately used the adamantine sealing chains. Whoosh! Suddenly the chain rushed out from her body, bonding the Kyuubi's chakra, preventing the Jidomazo from swallowing it. All of a sudden, the game of tug-of-war started. Not bad, Uzumaki clan. She's standing her ground against the Jidomazo. But this is nothing but a futile struggle. Madara, who was on the head of the Jidomazo, looked calmly below. The Kyuubi's chakra was slowly being pulled by the Jidomazo, although Kushina was trying to fight back. Her power against the Renninjan's outer path was not enough, she could barely slow down the speed of the absorption. The Kyuubi's head was already swallowed, then his shoulders and claws were slowly following. Kushina's heart screamed in awe the moment she saw that. If this continues, the Kyuubi is gonna completely get sealed inside the Jidomazo. Although Madara's oppression caused her high pressure, Kanon wasn't gonna just watch Kushina get defeated. Paper Shuriken. It was useless to attack the Jidomazo directly, so she targeted Madara, who was on top of it. As long as she can take down Madara, Kushina will be saved. However, Madara did only a faint glance at Kanon's attack, before a sizable blue skeleton's thorax appeared around him blocking Kanon's paper shuriken, then the sword in his hand fell and directly hit her. The moment she got hit, her body turned into pieces of paper in midair, then reaggregated woundless. Even though she didn't get injured, Kanon was still surprised. She didn't expect Madara to pull out such a powerful technique in this situation. Kibaku. Kanon stretched her hand, and hundreds of paper flew over toward Madara and danced around his Susanoo. Suddenly, they turned into explosion papers. However, in the face of her attack, Madara didn't even have the thought of dodging. He even showed a hint of disdain in his eyes, and let those papers explode. Boom! The explosion was intense, but it didn't even leave a scratch on Madara's Susanoo. Seeing that none of her attacks could stop him, and how the Kyuubi's chakra was slowly getting swallowed out of Kushina's body, Kanon became anxious. She knew that once the Kyuubi gets captured, she as her Jinchuriki will die. Although she has always envied Kushina because Naito loves her, she never wished for her death. Kushina is the most important person to Naito, for that she was gonna try her best to protect her. However, she couldn't do anything for neither the Jidomazo nor Madara. She could only look at how powerless is Kushina getting the more the Kyuubi's chakra is getting swallowed. This cannot be allowed to continue, Naito-sensei. Where are you? Kanon clenched her teeth, with Naito's figure appearing in her mind. At that moment, she couldn't think of anything but him. After all, only Naito can solve this crisis. Kushina was struggling. She was using her chains to pull the Kyuubi's chakra back, but obviously, she was losing against the Jidomazo. Looking at how half of the Kyuubi's body was already swallowed, she felt horrified. She didn't know when Naito will come back, but in any case, she wasn't gonna give up. Boom! Suddenly, one of her chains got broken, then a second and third followed. Boom! 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 The chains were giving up on her, and she could no longer fight back. Only a few were left, and once they all get broken, the Kyuubi gonna get sealed entirely inside the Jidomazo. Kushina's heart was almost gonna sink in desperation, as she looked to the sky to watch it for the last time. Suddenly, she saw starlight moving at high speed from a distance. This stream of light was coming from the land of rain borders and was cutting through the dark clouds of the entire country. Civilians and ninjas alike were extremely shocked by this event. He was moving at breakneck speed, the only thing left behind it is the split sky. Finally, just when the last chain was gonna break, a sound full of anger and killing intent emitted from the sky. Maadaara. Accompanied with that anger and killing intent, Naito's figure appeared from a distance with his golden Kusanagi sword in his hand, and he didn't hesitate to wave. Whoosh! An invisible wave suddenly crossed that whole distance and fell toward the Jidomazo. Useless. Madara faintly looked at it. The chains of the outer path cannot be broken by regular attacks. However, it didn't take long before the expression on his face changed. That invisible wasn't targeting the Jidomazo but the Kyuubi's body. Whoosh! Half of the Kyuubi's body was already swallowed by the Jidomazo. When Kushina's last chain breaks, the demonic statue was gonna complete the absorption and seal the Kyuubi in. However, when Naito's attack fell, it split the Kyuubi's body into two halves from the waist. Naito's attack divided the Kyuubi's chakra into two halves. The first got swallowed by the Jidomazo, and the other half got free from his grasp. The Jidomazo is the Juubi's vessel. The degree of his firmness cannot be accurately measured. The situation at that point has reached an extremely critical degree. It was too late for Naito to get close. Naturally, the most secure choice was made. This is. Kushina got slightly stunned for a moment, then suddenly reacted and immediately withdrew the Kyuubi's chakra back inside her. Madara looked surprised. He shook his head, didn't try again. Instead, he turned and looked at Naito in the distance. Whoosh! In the next moment, Naito flashed from the sky and fell directly to Kushina's side. He didn't pay attention to Madara and checked on her first. Are you okay? I'm fine. Kushina shook her head slightly. She lost half of the Kyuubi's chakra, but she wasn't injured. At this time, in Kushina's body, Kurama was getting furious. Hey, why the hell did your damn boyfriend do that for? Well, if it weren't for my damn boyfriend you would have already been sealed inside the Jidomazo. Kushina helplessly patted the Kurama's head. Naito felt relieved the moment he saw Kushina's fine, then looked at Konoha, who seemed exhausted on the other side. Although her paper ninjutsu can turn her whole body into paper, and prevent her from getting injured, the constant use of that technique has also consumed a large amount of her chakra. Kanon did her best to save Kushina. Although her opponent was Madara, she didn't give up on her. Naito could see all of that with his ultra perceive. Thank you, Kanon. No, this is what anyone would do. Although I couldn't save Kushina-sensei, she almost. Kanon walked over with a touch of sorrow evident in her expression. This girl has a light spirit, and the last thing she cares about is herself. Naito's wellness and happiness is the most important thing for her. Thus, she never interfered in his relationship with Kushina. She didn't try to fight her for Naito. She was just like a white, beautiful flower standing there quietly. KO. Anna's kindness has also made it hard for Kushina to hate her or raise any hostility with her. However, she believed that Kanon's love for Naito would never be weaker than her. Madara's gazed at them indifferently. He looked at the two girls at the bottom, then at Naito. An invisible momentum suddenly raised at that moment. Kushina, Kanon, you must fall back. Naito coldly stared at Madara in front of him. Although, it was clear that Madara was targeting the Kyuubi, not Kushina. However, this could kill Kushina, and that has directly crossed Naito's bottom line. When he saw how Madara and the Jidomazo directly vanished, Naito immediately reacted. Although he didn't know how this was done, he still assumed that he was targeting Kushina. Naito used his full speed, and at an almost unbelievable rate, he crossed the whole distance between the land of fire and the rain village in a few minutes. Whether he will be resurrected in the future, or not wasn't important. What is now is only killing Madara so Naito can alleviate the anger in his heart. Whoosh! The horror caused in the heart by these two killing intents was extreme. Even the ground under Naito could no longer withstand his momentum and started to crack. You Naito, be careful. Feeling the momentum of these two, Kanon took a deep breath and realized that she's not even qualified to watch from a short distance. After she nodded to Naito, she retreated with Kushina. I didn't expect you to be this fast. There was some miscalculation, but in the end, the purpose was achieved. How about we play a little now? Madara looked calmly at Naito, then suddenly with one hand seal, the pipes behind him that were connecting him to the Jidomazo, started madly to flow with vitality. It forcibly let Madara recover part of his vitality. His body was following with an enormous amount of chakra, but it also destroyed all of his tenketsu, which is equivalent to opening all of the 8 gates. This is gonna be his last fight, whether he wins or lose, it will end up with him being dead. He stood once with the strongest man alive and fought until the end. He never ran from a fight before, he never turned his back. Madara has never avoided a war before, this is the meaning of having a strong heart. Even if he could make Nagato summon him again and save him, he wasn't gonna do that. Because, if he did that, he's not Uchiha Madara. Burst with vitality, Madara's appearance got a little bit younger, and his hair regained its black color. Suddenly, he jumped straight from the top of the Jidomazo to the front of Naito. Almost all the pipes that were connecting him to the demonic statue got broken, and by the time the last one was disconnected from his back, the Jidomazo disappeared into the smoke. Come on, let's see the power of the strongest of this era, I hope you can make me excited. Madara's younger face was revealing a hint of excitement. He also wanted to fight Naito. Since the end of the battle between him and Hashirama, he stayed in the dark for the whole time observing the world of Shinobi. He never felt this excitement, until he met Naito here on this battlefield. As you wish. The look on Naito's face looked cold, he extended his hand and injected his chakra into his golden ring, and suddenly it turned to a sword that he held in his hands immediately. Looking at the shiny golden Kusanagi sword in Naito's hands, Madara couldn't help but show his admiration, saying, "The perfect Kusanagi sword, what an amazing looking weapon." Whoosh! Suddenly, a huge amount of chakra started surging inside Madara's body. Madara knew how much Naito is powerful, and he wasn't gonna hesitate to use all that he has to finish him. Thus, his full force was needed. The madness in his eyelids was rising as the chakra in his body was bursting out. Suddenly, the 3 tomo in his eyes under the stimulation of this force, turned into a pair of Mangekyou Sharingan. For Madara, who could awaken the Reninjan after the eternal Mangekyou Sharingan, it is too simple for him to awaken any ordinary Sharingan into a Mangekyou Sharingan. For him, it's just like eating and sleeping. The moment those Mangekyou Sharingan appeared, a blue skeleton shows up along them covering Madara's body, followed by the flesh and blood, then the skin, and finally the armor. This horrifying chakra made Kanon and Kushina, who were retreating in the distance, freeze for a moment. This chakra is even more powerful than the complete Kyuubi. So if you mix Madara's genetics, with the Mangekyou Sharingan, and the power of the 6th paths, what is gonna be the final result? The answer was right in front of Naito. A complete body. Susanoo. The dark blue armored giant stood between the heavens and the earth, and the horrible chakra that was surging from him was horrifying to the point of almost suffocating from its repression. Even the rain shinobis which are far away from the battlefield could feel its enormous power and terrifying momentum. What is that? Impossible, this is nothing. Civilians are already speechless, and the ninjas inside the village felt cold just by the look at it. Even the former top executives of the Akatsuki like Yoriko, who know a lot of information about the world, were stunned. Is that the legendary technique, the complete Susanoo? Then, the person inside it is Madara. But how is this possible? It can't be anyone but him, but hasn't he been killed by Konoha's first Hokage? Then how is he? Under the gazes of countless people, Madara, who was standing inside the head of his complete Susanoo, overlooked on Naito below. The Susanoo suddenly moved and took the sword out of its waist. The chakra flew widely to the blade, then it fell toward Naito. The only man who could fight against the complete Susanoo is Hashirama. If you still claim that this era belongs to you, then you should be able to take on its full power, don't you think? Madara said while the sword that looked like it can cut through anything was falling. The air splits directly into both sides of the sword, you see two waves of air with the naked eye. And even when the sword was still far away from hitting Naito, the ground around him could no longer bear that strength and begin to crumble. The strength of the complete Susanoo is way much stronger than what I've imagined. Naito looked up at the sword while his eyes were flashing slightly, but there wasn't the slightest fear in them. Yes, if it's not an eternal Sharingan, the Susanoo cannot be perfect. But with these eyes, Madara's chakra combined with the Jidomazo's chakra, the sixth path's power. Apparently, Madara managed to somehow use the complete Susanoo. There was a hint of confidence in his eyelids, as Naito was holding his sword tight with his right hand. Ding! Suddenly, Naito's perfect Kusanagi sword clashed with the complete Susanoo sword, emitting a loud sound and bursting out the air in all directions. The size of the two swords couldn't be compared, but power is not measured by size. When two swords crossed each other, there was a moment where silence controlled the place, then two forces burst out, crushing on each other violently. The Susanoo's sword swayed with endless blue light rising to the sky, and the Kusanagi sword spread its golden light endlessly on the ground. It was like a confrontation between heaven and earth. Whoosh! Under this crazy collision, a small crack appeared on Susanoo's sword, then it spread directly across the entire blade, and the whole sword broke from the middle. Half of the sword flew behind Naito's head, tearing the ground toward a mountain in the distance, which ended up split into two halves too. After the breaking of the sword, Naito's sword swayed with a horrible, violent power that burst out to the distant sky, opening the dark clouds in it. However, this was not the most shocking thing. The most shocking thing is not the fact that he could break the Susanoo's sword, nor the split mountain, nor the sky that got torn open, but what between them. The rain stopped. It's not like the sky has stopped raining, you could have seen the rain coming down from a distance, but when it hits some point, it stagnates in midair and stays that way. That point was a wave mark that was created in space from Naito's sword. It seemed as if he has cut the world into two halves. That wave mark was bending the space. Time seemed to be stagnated for a moment, without mentioning the rain shinobis in the distance. Even Kushina, Yoriko, and Kanon, who saw before Naito's power, felt shocked. It's like living the same moment, and it felt like it's gonna last forever. However, after a few moments, the mark wave began to fade away, and things regularly started to go back to normal. The rain fell again as if originally there were two separate worlds and suddenly has merged. The clouds filled the sky one more time, and the cracks behind Naito has got instantly filled with water, forming a big river. However, You can hear nothing but the sound of the water. The silence was controlling the place. You broke the Susanu's sword. Since Hashirama, you're the first who managed to compete with the complete Susanu. Madara was inside his complete Susanu, looked calmly below, but his heart wasn't as calm as he looked. He accepted Naito to be able to compete with the complete Susanu, but Naito's power is beyond his imagination. He even managed to cut Susanu's sword into 2 halves. Looks like you're not all talk, little demon. This era belongs to you. Uchiha Madara. The sword in Naito's hand slowly melted into a golden liquid, then got wrapped around his hand, then covered his hands, forming a pair of golden gauntlets. Naito looked up at Madara with an extremely calm expression. Don't you think you're talking too much? Boom. Just when those words were out of his mouth, he clenched his fist and threw a punch facing the front of the complete Susanu. The distance was quite far, but Naito didn't try to come close first, nor did he jump to the front of Madara, but he directly waved on the space in front of him. Whoosh! The moment that fist fell, the space in front of Naito suddenly showed a terrible distortion, and made the form of a huge fist. Looking closely, the fist seemed to be composed of countless slender white cracks. The power of the shock force was enough to bend the space. It's apparent, but only for a moment. When Naito's fist fell, a huge fist printed on the space, then it suddenly rushed toward the complete Susanu. The stare on Madara's face was cold. He controlled the complete Susanu and moved the broken sword in front of him to block Naito's shot. However, the power of this punch was shockingly even stronger than what he imagined. The ground started trembling for the power of this punch, and the broken sword that Madara's used to block Naito's attack instantly turned into countless pieces. Then, Susanu's 2 arms followed. Boom! This all-out punch completely shattered Susanu's upper body. After the destroying of the Sasunu, the power of that punch got slightly weakened, but it didn't stop and flew to the sky. Once again, the dark clouds in the sky got blasted. Susanu's upper body was gone, leaving only the lower body behind. At the last moment, Madara moved from top of the Susanu's head to the lower body, because he knew that he won't be able to block this enormous power. Although he didn't get directly hit by this attack, Madara was stunned. If Naito's golden sword made him a little surprised, then this punch has shocked him. A punch that can destroy the complete Susanu is simply out of this world's logic. Even Hashirama will need his most powerful technique, the true several thousand hands, and even then, he won't be able to break the Susanu's defensive. But Naito has done it with a punch. It seems that I've underestimated you. But from now on, the real battle will begin. Seeing how horrifying is Naito's strength, Madara felt shocked, but he didn't have any fear. Instead, he felt excited. Buzz. Because he didn't have to think of whether his body can withstand it or not, the chakra within Madara's body was surging madly to recover his complete Susanu back. Upon doing this, even his middle-aged appearance that he regained before got lost. And once again, he looked very old. Madara was drying his body out of energy to the point that even his blood has drained out in the process. He was on the verge of dying, but the look in his eyelids was fascinating, full of killing intent and the excitement that was long lost after Hashirama's death. Ah! With this last war cry, the complete Susanu draws his sword once again, preparing for the next round. Whoosh! The blade suddenly turned out to be a blue dragon that was rushing from the sword's scabbard toward Naito, who was also in the direction of the rain village where Kanan and Kushina have retreated. Upon seeing this, Naito stared at Madara coldly. So, I can't dodge then, huh? The last time he took Susanu's attack head-on, he broke the sword, but the power of that confrontation has caused a massive disaster to the field behind Naito. In other words, if Naito wants to stop this sword, he will need to block off all of the after effects too. Show me how you will stop this one. Madara was barely standing, but the pride in his eyelids was evident as he looked at Naito below. Even when he's old again, his momentum was as strong as ever. Proudly overlooking the world. Since you want me to get it head-on, then how about this? The look in Naito's eye was similar, with the idea of ruling the world in his mind, and stopping Madara's attack. Naito suddenly extended his hand in front of him. The golden Kusanagi instantly melted, then covered both of his hands. Then just when the sword was about to hit Naito, two large transparent hands appeared in front of him and caught the sword. Roar! A loud sound emitted along with the chaotic explosion of chakra, with the edge of the blade that seemed to be able to tear everything unable to move any longer under the huge shock force hands. Naito was using all of his strength to stop this attack from reaching the village. Suddenly, the shock force burst out widely. Under this enormous power, Susanu's sword stopped moving, then suddenly cracked. This crack spread to the entire blade in an instant, then it got shattered into countless pieces under the pressure of the shock force. This kind of power. It seems to be more than a simple bloodline limit. Madara couldn't help but feel that something was different with Naito's strength. It seems more flexible, and even stronger than his complete Susanu. Even with the sixth path's power, he could still defeat it. That power can compete against the power of the sixth paths. No, the feeling it gives me is very similar to Hashirama's. It should be the Sage Mode power. Madara had some doubts and wanted to find out more about Naito's strength, but when he tried to attack again, he couldn't find any strength inside him. The power in his body has already been consumed. He couldn't even stand. He was entirely relying on the power of the Susanu to carry on. You're the first to make me this excited after Hashirama. It's a pity that we can't continue. Sensing the situation in his body, Madara whispered in his heart, then he slowly shook his head, revealing a disappointed expression. Looking at the Naito in the distance, although his body was on the verge of collapsing, he smirked proudly. Madara knew that all that Naito wants is to kill him with his hands, but even if he was in this state, he wasn't gonna give him the chance to seize that wish. He's Uchiha Madara, he wasn't gonna let a kid kill him, even Hashirama wouldn't kill him if he didn't let him. It was all part of his plan. The man who can kill him is none but himself. Suddenly, he gathered all the strength left in his body and tried to directly explode along with his complete Susanu, leaving the last gift for Naito before leaving. Even if I'm in such a bad state, it's not easy to kill me. Sorry, but you will have to wait until next time. Is that what you think? Naito's figure suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Madara, and whispered these words, which made Madara's eyes open wide. What? Madara's heart got filled with disbelief. Naito was far away. This is like teleportation. If this is not the case, then how did he cross all of that distance in a second? Although he knew that Naito's speed is very fast, still, this kind of movement is unexpected. He almost made him think of Tobirama's flying thunder god. However, this is a space technique, and Naito is only using his pure body speed. His pure physical speed is almost the same as the flying thunder god. Even Madara couldn't help but feel shocked. Floating in the air, Naito seemed calm, which made Madara feel like he was being overlooked. I guess I'll pass. I'm gonna kill you now. Naito knew that Madara has used all of his power, and will die at any moment. But he wants to commit suicide. Sorry, but I'm faster. At that moment, Naito whispered, then he clenched his fist and slammed it in front of Madara. Boom! When Naito's punch directly bombarded the body of the complete Susanoo, a repulsive force suddenly broke out. It looked as if a star has crushed on the ground. Endless white light was coming together, glowing in the middle of the battlefield. That white light suddenly penetrated the complete Susanoo, reaching Madara, who was in the middle. Under this force, Madara's body instantly turned into ashes, but the white light didn't stop. Once again it penetrated Susanoo's body from the back, but only this time it got broken into countless pieces. Whoosh! The white light rose to the sky, then burst open in the dark clouds. It kept spreading far away, covering the entire sky. It didn't take it a second before it also shattered all of the clouds in the sky together with the rain falling from it. After a long time, the blue sky appeared again in everyone's eyes. There were no traces for those black clouds, as if they weren't there in the first place. Even the clouds that were covering the entire nation will need a long time before it fills this area again. The sun shone on the muddy ground, covering it with a golden glow. The complete Susanoo disappeared along with Madara. If it weren't for the messy battleground that they left behind, no one would believe that this has just happened. The battle between Madara and Naito didn't last only for a few shots, but each one of them showed another level of strength. Silence. Naito landed on the ground, with two golden gauntlets covering his hands. Suddenly they melted again around Naito's finger, and turned into a golden ring. Naito's loose white cloak suddenly waved gently by the wind. Although every single living thing inside the village was looking at Naito, none of them could wake up from their shock, not until he gazed at them. At that moment, all of them showed their awe. How could they not feel this way? This battle wasn't between two mortals, but a battle of two gods. They felt that the battle between Kushina and Nagato was barely believable, but this one has already broken through the limits of logic. Some people could no longer talk, and other people couldn't even breathe. This is how shocking watching this battle was. Kushina and Kanon felt worried when they saw the complete Susanoo and wanted to help, but when they felt Madara and Naito's momentum, they could no longer move. The reason why Kushina was worried about Naito is that she fought against him several times, and they were even close in terms of strength when she was using the Kusanagi armor. But what she has just seen was beyond her imagination. She's way far from being close to Naito. He could destroy her with one punch if he wanted. This is incredible. Finally, when Naito reached her, Kushina woke up, and with a lovely look on her face, she whispered, "Does this mean you've finally mastered the perfect sage mode?" Kinda. Naito looked at her and smiled, then he said, "I figured it out after I left the village. Otherwise, it would have been tough to kill Madara." Kushina naturally knows all about Naito's strength and the sage mode. She even knows the reverse Hashimon Tonku, and with this, Naito's power is way stronger, which made her feel happy for him. Kanon, on the side, jumped with a smile, then said, "Congratulations, Naito-sensei." Naito nodded at her, then smiled and turned to Kushina again. He pinched her cheeks from both sides, then whispered, "Did Nagato show up here before Madara?" "Yes." Kushina nodded. Although she had just experienced a life and death situation, the moment she saw Naito, she felt peaceful again. "So, what are we gonna do?" Naito looked at Kushina firmly, then said, "You're doing nothing. You go back to the village first. I will clean up the mess here, then come back soon." Kushina nodded gently. Kanon, on the side, felt slightly envious of how Naito was worried about Kushina's safety, but the smile didn't leave her face. She was happy that Kushina is safe, thus, she couldn't help but smile at Naito. Whoosh! Naito let go of Kushina's hand, then flashed away after the two pointed out the direction that Nagato has taken to retreat. Using his full speed, Nagato, who was forced to leave the battlefield before Naito's arrival, was still struggling to hide his killing intent. However, even though he could feel that killing intent, Naito couldn't find Nagato even after he reached the borders of the Land of Rain. Standing on the edge of the Land of Rain, Naito looked around, then shook his head slightly. It seems that the battle with Madara was still a bit long, and Nagato managed to run away. However, Nagato cannot hide forever, he will appear again. Even if Nagato kept hiding forever, at some point, the scope of his Ultra Perceive would reach the entire world. But currently, Nagato is gone, and Naito gave up the search and turned back to Land of Fire again, and precisely to the Cloud frontline battlefield. Because of the sudden situation, Naito rushed toward the Rain Village at full speed without thinking and missed one thing, that is, White Zetsu and Obito. The Sunbee has already been caught. That event from the original didn't happen, but somehow Madara ended up kidnapping Obito in mysterious circumstances. Of course, Obito is not the last thing that Naito is thinking about, all that he wants is to find Black Zetsu. This guy didn't appear once since the start, and Naito didn't have any idea what he was doing now. In the original, Madara thought that Zetsu was created from his will, but Zetsu is Kaguya's third son, and he's Hagoromo's brother. All the wars in the world of Shinobi can be followed back to him. The purpose was to enhance the power of Hashirama and Madara, and to open the Rinnegan, then finally resurrect Kaguya. Madara thinks that everything is under his plan, but it's all calculated by Zetsu. That's the reason why Naito has called Madara a loser. At full speed, Naito has crossed the Rain Land and reached the vast Land of the Fire, then came to the Cloud battlefield. At this time, the war has reached its final stage. The Cloud got ultimately defeated. Naito didn't pay attention to them, then went directly looking for Obito. It was a pity that after he crossed all of that distance, he didn't find any traces for Obito, nor Black or White Zetsu. Forget it. Once again, Naito couldn't find his target. Naito was tired of playing hide-and-seek games with these guys who only like to stay in the dark. No matter what is their plan, as long as they dare to appear, Naito will be there to crush them. All calculations in the face of absolute power will end in vain. At the edge of the world, a shadow was standing there comfortably in the dark. How did that guy know? Zetsu whispered while thinking. Since the beginning, he felt something strange about Naito and paid him more attention. He once thought about manipulating things to get Naito to his side, but he immediately gave up the moment he saw how dangerous Naito is. He felt that he was even more dangerous than Madara. As Naito's strength was getting stronger, Zetsu felt grow with feeling more uneasy about him, and more uncertain about if he could ever manage to get rid of killing him. There was a time when he could kill him, but failing to let Naito grow to such a degree, even with the help of the Jidomazo, Madara couldn't stop him. Zetsu has come from Hagoromo's era. He witnessed everything and recorded the history of this world, but he never saw anything like Naito's ability. Naito's power seems out of this world, it's extraordinary and keeps on surprising him every time. Fortunately, he finally brought Madara entirely on the right track. The next thing to do is to guide Nagato and the talent of Obito, but I need to be careful. It ever discovered us, things might get wrong. The moment he thought about Naito again, jealousy burst in Zetsu's heart. As Kaguya's third son, Naito's strength is not enough to scare him. Even if he's twice stronger, he will not be afraid, but the mystery around Naito is what he feared. Everything in this world was evident in his mind, including Madara. Only Naito felt strange and unknown, which made him fear to approach him. It doesn't matter who will catch all of the Baijua. As long as the Juubi appears, everything will work out fine, but the danger is so great. Zetsu didn't talk for a long time and kept thinking about this matter. After a long time, he looked like he has made his mind, then his body slowly sunk into the ground and disappeared. The news of clouds falling reached the entire world, but this time it didn't cause the usual storm because Naito has already managed to defeat 3 major villages before. This news was the type that makes people extremely scared to even talk about it. What was surprising for people at this point is why would a major village want to pick a fight with Naito? The situation in the world made everyone panic. However, it was because of the other news that reached the world as a whole instantly. Even the 4 major villages, including Konoha, Sarutobi, Danza, and everyone felt terrified. The fact that the Rinnegan alone has appeared once again in this world can cause a 4th war when this one wasn't over yet. But when they heard that Madara, who once was the rival of the god of Shinobi, has appeared again, the entire world fell into chaos. Especially those who have witnessed that era, such as Sarutobi and Onaki, do know what kind of a man is Madara and how strong he is. No one knew that Madara has faked his death and hidden in the dark until now, which made them all ask the same question: what is the planning? Before they could even think about the answer, they heard the following news: that Madara is currently outside of the Rain Village and has launched a world war that was ended by Naito. Which once again shocked everyone's minds. Those who have seen that battle couldn't translate it into words. Those who saw the battlefield after couldn't understand what kind of fight could change the topography of land nor its weather. If it was said that Naito has used his own power to suppress all the Baijua and the major villages, killed the 7 legendary swordsmen, then defeated all of the 4 Hokages combined, people will put Naito in the position of the god of this world. But if Naito has killed Madara, who only has been defeated before by the first Hokage, this makes him in the eyes of everyone no different from the man himself. Although the war wasn't over yet, the major villages have not yet started peace talks, everyone was thinking about the aftermath. Naito has played a crucial role at the end of the Second War, but in the Third, he played a decisive role. The moment the news about Naito defeating Madara reached the world, everyone dropped the demigod title and started calling him the god of Shinobi. As Madara admitted in the end, this era belongs to you, Naito. His power is above the entire world. Even if the 5 major villages will have to bow their heads in Naito's face, his power is out of this world. Even the 5 Hokages are like ants compared to him. This is what it means to be the god of Shinobi. The Third World War was reaching its end. The Cloud Village were guarding their borders against Konoha's attack, the mist returned to Land of Rain, and the rock was holding its troops. The only side that remained was the sand, but they only were defending against Konoha's direct attacks. Because the Ichibi was earlier caught by Naito, Sakumo led Konoha's forces to press more on the sand, which made the Kazekage with no choice but to go personally to participate in the battle. 4 big battlefields, they have retreated, and the only one remaining was on the Land of Wind borders, similar to the end of the Second World War. Rain Village. In a quiet and elegant room, Naito was sitting there meditating. In front of him, there was a strange black ball floating. The ball had a small hole in the middle and felt very powerful. This was the meteorite that Naito took from Hoshigakyo. It's easy to come out with great theories, but it is not easy to turn them into reality. Sure enough, the soul is far more mysterious than the body. Holding the meteorite in his hand, Naito whispered while sensing the chakra contained in it. He couldn't find White Zetsu nor Obito, so he returned to the rain, and began to explore the second stage of the soul art. And the way to do that was to find a soulless chakra. It's essential to study new techniques and continue to improve one's strength. Naito was too lazy to play hide and seek with them. He only seeks to push his power to the extreme. If he can open the 8 gates of the reverse Hakemon Tonku, he believes he will have the power to even defeat Kaguya, then all the conspiracy and calculation will be meaningless in the face of absolute power. After he got the final research results from Orochimaru, Naito has relatively completed its concept and also inferred its method of operation. But infers is an aspect, and translating it into reality is another aspect. Learning a ninjutsu is not a simple matter of knowing its concept, but every detail is needed to use it. The lack of these details is what might cause the release of ninjutsu to fail. The mystery that is wrapping around the soul art might cause more than just failing. No one knows what will happen. If it were Orochimaru, he would keep experimenting on others until he successfully does it. He will never try it on himself before that. The problem is not the devouring of the chakra itself, but rather how to build a space for the soul. Falling into deep meditation, a scene emerged in Naito's mind. This soul art technique is very similar to the first half of Orochimaru's living corpse reincarnation technique, but there are still some considerable differences. The most important things are that the user needs to trap the other in a soul space where he envelops the mind of his victim, then the user's soul dominates the body. And that's precisely what Naito needed to figure out, is how to create that soul space. This is troublesome. Should I go to find Orochimaru again? Naito revealed a helpless expression. Orochimaru is way better than him when it comes to researching. After all, if it weren't for Orochimaru, Naito would never have been able to reach this point. However, although he found it troublesome to deal with these kinds of situations, Naito could overcome a lot of difficulties before with this research. After all, it's only a bunch of theories. Finishing half of the process alone, then going to Orochimaru again won't do him good. Orochimaru shouldn't have come with anything new in such a short period. Stretching a little, Naito stood up, then left the room of cultivation. How is the research? Kushina came over with a smile, then gently put her hands on his shoulders. I haven't done it yet, but there's still some progress. Naito took the back of her hands, then wrapped her arms around his neck. Putting her head on his shoulder, Kushina said, well, you shouldn't always expect everything so easy as developing the reverse Hakemon Tonku. Progress is good too. Listening to Kushina, Naito couldn't help but smile. Indeed, the difficulties that encountered Naito are really few, especially at first. When he developed the reverse Hakemon Tonku, he didn't encounter any problems and directly succeeded. Thinking about it, the shock force was unexpectedly too suitable with the Hakemon Tonku, as if the two are meant to complete each other. For Orochimaru to ultimately develop the living corpse reincarnation, it took him years of experimenting. The development of the second stage of the soul art is at the same level of difficulty as that technique, and it took him only a few months to complete half of it. This progress is outrageously fast. Still, he's not satisfied. Naito has always been this greedy. Kushina was hugging Naito from his back with her head leaning on his shoulder. Her small cheeks on the side made Naito with no choice but to feel eager to kiss her. During this period, in addition to studying the second stage of the soul art, Naito also applied the operation of the first and the second stage of the natural energy enhancing on Kushina, which made her reach the same level as Anko. I don't know if it's because Kushina is physically unique or because the Kyuubi can help her control natural energy. Kushina's progress was even faster than Anko. After completing the first and second stages, with Kurama's help, Kushina could carry on and successfully reach the third stage. Then the progress became very slow. Just after she reached the third stage, things became slow. Naito could only help her with the first two after that, and a long-term practicing process was needed. She needed to reach the fourth and fifth stages before she could reach Naito's level, the perfect sage mode. Although she only completed the first two, Kushina's skin has become more crystal clear. And her body became full of vitality and energy. Looking at Kushina next to him, Naito forgot all about the troubles and tiredness that he had to go through, and couldn't help but turn and hug her gently. "This is exactly what I want from this world." Naito whispered these words softly. He was ready to do anything for Kushina, no matter what is or who is he needs to overcome, even if it's Kaguya herself. For this reason, Naito swore that he's gonna keep walking no matter how hard it's the road. He will go unswervingly and get stronger until he's on the peak of this world, until he can protect her. "What happened to you so suddenly?" Kushina's cheeks became red. She was slightly surprised to see Naito hugging her. "It's nothing." Naito let go of her then smiled. Kushina cluelessly shrugged, then suddenly leaned toward Naito and kissed him, then turned with a smile. "I've made dessert, come and eat some." "Sounds good." Naito looked at her for a moment, then followed Kushina. After taking a break, Naito restarted his practice again. For Naito, now sleeping is not a big issue. The perfect sage mode prevents him from feeling any kind of fatigue or exhaustion. As for the spiritual aspect, Naito's souls are strong enough to make him no longer in need of sleep. The second stage of soul art, which is half completed, is much easier than he imagined. The difficulty is utterly incomparable to the first half. Naito has already created a prototype of the soul space. Soul space is called spiritual space. It has nothing to do with space ninjutsu and has nothing to do with the power of space. It's about the purest spiritual power. Like the Tsukuyomi Uchiha Itakai's unique genjutsu, create a spiritual space that belongs to Uchiha Itakai, and the one that Naito wants to create has the same nature, but Uchiha Obito's technique is in the same category. It creates a substance space which Beltotto the type of pure space and has a little connection with the spiritual. Both can be called spaces, but one is mainly spirit, and the other is primarily space. The two are fundamentally different. Spiritual space belongs to the former and has no substance. It's a space between imagination and reality. It's similar to the dream world, but slightly different because it can affect reality. If the pure fantasy world is 0, and the real world is 100, the dream world will be 50, and the spiritual space should be 75, between 50 and 100. The problematic part is here. The degree needs to be precise, it cannot be substantive, and it cannot be weak. In the endless darkness, in the depth of Naito's soul, it can be said that it's the innermost of his spiritual ocean. In the middle of that darkness, there was a bubble with a faint white light glowing inside it. Naito was standing there looking down and thinking, while his figure seemed slightly unreal. This was the prototype of the spiritual space that was created by Naito. Set. Looking up, then around, Naito's eyes seemed sharp. The power of his soul surged, then got connected to his chakra, making this illusory world gradually become real. The ground appeared below the starry sky above. But at this time, Naito shook his head slightly, then controlled the sky above to disperse, and focused on the ground. It cannot be too real or too unreal, it must be in the middle. Naito has almost mastered it completely, and he only needs to add the last touch in his spiritual space. The last touch was to integrate his soul completely with the spiritual space. This final step is also the most difficult because initially, this space was conceived from his soul. And now, to fully merge the soul with this space, regardless of who came first, you will need firm control. But for Naito, this is not hard enough. Naito's soul is too strong, far stronger than ordinary people. His control is naturally also stronger than Orochimaru. It took Orochimaru years of experiments, but Naito could create the spiritual space in half a year. Even this last step is almost completed. The world outside of the bubble, the darkness, everything poured into the inside, and eventually, the outside world became empty. On the other hand, the bubble became solid, and it was no longer emitting that white light. Its edges seemed to be completely connected with the outside world, and there were no longer any gaps or boundaries. It's finally done. Looking at this scene, Naito felt relieved. The process of developing this technique required him a lot of focus. He needed to be careful, he didn't want to make any mistakes. Silently, Naito's consciousness withdrew from the spiritual space and returned to reality, then slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the meteorite in front of him exuding that strange power, Naito reached out with his hand, and grabbed it, then squeezed his fingers hard. KHR. The meteor opened up, and all of its power poured into Naito's body in an instant. Subsequently, Naito closed his eyes once again, and his consciousness came into the spiritual space. The stream of purple chakra that was floating in the space seemed like it was trying to force its way out to the spiritual space world. But with a cold stare, using his spiritual shock, he suppressed that purple chakra and made it tremble for a moment. The reason why he created the spiritual space was to let the chakra enter here, to have a place where it can have direct contact with his soul. Next step. Looking at the purple chakra stagnated in the space after he suppressed it with his spiritual shock, he shook his head, then he lifted the pressure slightly. A ray of purple chakra dissipated, then spread instantly. Although it's just a ray, it covered the entire field of the spiritual space, because it's not related to the outside world, it's not restricted by the outside rules. Thus, there's no such thing as distance. KHR. Under the dispersal of this purple chakra, there was a slight tremor in Naito's spiritual space, but Naito didn't panic. Instead, he looked happy. With a principle similar to the living corpse reincarnation technique, it is indeed possible for chakra to fuse with the soul and enhance it. Even if the outer chakra is soulless, it still has energy. The blending process between that energy and soul will always cause conflict. However, with the help of the spiritual space, Naito could temper the process, and in the end, the chakra started to slowly fuse with the soul. This fusion effectively increased the strength of the soul. At this point, Naito is considering finally completing the second stage of soul art. I'll take things slowly and see if it will improve. After he finally revealed the cover of The Mystery of the Soul, Naito felt the constant enhancement of his soul, and regained the joy in his heart, and started to work on increasing the rate of the fusion. Naito eased the suppression again, and the continuous stream of purple chakra suddenly became thicker, and the chakra spread in the entire spiritual space. This time, the stream of chakra showed a sign of instability in the fusion process, which was barely maintained under Naito's spiritual shock. Gradually, the spiritual space adapted to this rate and became stable again. It seems that the fusion process can only be rated at this speed for the time being, but as the spiritual space becomes more stable, the speed can be increased. Sensing the situation in spiritual space, and the state of his soul, Naito nodded firmly. He didn't try to lift the suppression any longer and maintained the same level. He suppressed the whole chakra in a purple orb with only a ray of chakra from was continually flowing and blending with the spiritual space, fusing with Naito's soul. Feeling the amount, Naito estimated that at this rate, it will take several years to fully absorb, but in the process, he should be able to increase the speed, so the specific time cannot be calculated. The progress is very slow. I'm afraid that even after the full absorption, I will only be able to open the 7th gate of the reverse Hakimon Tonku. But this is also expected. Then, I should also use this time to go to the source of the Ryumyaku, and add the Dragon Veins chakra. After he thought about it, Naito withdrew from the spiritual space, and his consciousness returned the reality. There's no need for him to absorb it too, he just needs to set it up. This can be operated without interrupting the fusion process. This time, Naito's training has only taken him half a month, but when he got out of the training room, he received a piece of surprising news. The Third World War is over. Of course, this is not unexpected, it should have ended a long time ago. What surprised him was the event that closed this war. This incident has also directly led to the complete end of the Third World War. That is the 4th Kazekage of the Sand, who died in the hand of Hatake Sakumo, Konoha's White Fang. However, it's a laughing matter that the 4th Kazekage is one of the major Kages in the world officially. After all, he's the weakest of the 3 previous generations, although he still has a lot of powerful forbidden techniques. Not everyone can kill a shadow-level powerhouse like Naito. At the last second, when Sakumo made the last strike, the Kazekage managed somehow to counter him with his sand release and pierced his heart. Sakumo died like a hero. Even so, the title of Konoha's Sakumo reached the top of this world, second to no one but Naito. The end of the Second World War was the moment when Naito became famous, but at the beginning of the Third, Naito was already the god of Shinobi. Sakumo cannot be compared with Naito's growth rate, but if he didn't reincarnate here, no one would have ever been compared to Sakumo. The Second World War was the birth of the new god of Shinobi, and the Third will always be remembered by the title of Konoha's White Fang. I didn't expect it to end this way. Naito sighed and recalled the past. After all, he had nothing but respect in his heart for Sakumo, who has pointed the road for him once, the man who once joined forces with him to fight the 3rd Tsushikage Oniki. The man that he used to work under and compare himself to him, Naito couldn't help but admire him. Compared to the original, the way he died on the battlefield after he killed the 4th Kazekage suited him more than committing suicide in his home. He will always be the hero that is respected by everyone, which is undoubtedly much better. Besides, Hatake Sakumo, just like the 3rd Hokage, has almost reached his peak and was gonna gradually grow weaker in the future. Rather than aging and dying old and weak, for a shinobi to die in such a heroic manner is more suitable for the man who once carried the title of Konoha's White Fang. Time is also an enemy. Naito clenched his fist gently, then raised his head, looking out into the sky through the window, and I will never lose to any enemy. Konoha Cemetery, where they hold memorial events of the deceased. The cemetery has a sculpture at the front, representing the will of fire of the village, and has the kanji for Hokage inscribed on its base. Among the graves, there was a separate monument, just like the one that was built for Naito before. Of course, Naito wasn't dead at the time. At this moment, in front of a monument with the title Konoha's White Fang carved on it, Naito stood there quietly, holding a wine glass in his hand, then gently poured the wine. Although people always die, not everyone can become an immortal existence like Kaguya. Life and death are very faint concepts in the shinobi world, especially after the development of the Edo Tensei, which can bring the dead again. For Sakumo, who died on the battlefield, it's such a disgrace to be summoned back. Standing in front of Sakumo's monument, a faint image of Sakumo's figure flashed in Naito's mind. Naito has almost let out a burst of spiritual shock from the anger he felt by the thought of thinking he was about to say goodbye to his friend. But he couldn't help but suppress those feelings in his heart and slowly turn and leave. At the training ground, Kakashi's forehead was dripping with sweat, holding a short sword in his hand, with chakra overflowing from its edge. Different from the original, Sakumo's death didn't affect Kakashi negatively, but made him proud of his father, and forced him to practice harder, trying to catch up with his father's footsteps. The training ground was empty, only Kakashi and Minato were there. Kakashi was a Jonin. The Chidori that he created wasn't inferior to the Rasengan that was created by his teacher, Minato, so even the former didn't have much more to offer him. After practicing for a while, Kakashi stopped, suddenly turned his head, and seemed like he noticed something on the side. There was a figure that looked like it's appearing out of thin air, and stayed that way for a long time, which made Kakashi couldn't help but look at it with a surprised expression. Who could come so close without him noticing? That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.